I often say, I love seminars too. Conducted a lot of them through the years, been attended probably as many as I've conducted. And one of the things about seminars is you kind of feel like you're drinking out of a fire hydrant. And so here's what we're going to do for the first few minutes. And I promise I'll keep us on time. But I'd almost rather sacrifice a little of my content to just do something that I feel is going to drive the point home. You learned a lot of things this weekend. Okay, there's been a lot of information. What's been really neat about it is that a lot of it's overlapped. And that was not by design. We certainly hoped it would. No one of these speakers, as far as I'm concerned, is one I'm aware of, corroborated with the others. Is that fair to say? Okay, and yet, there are a lot of people come up here and say a lot of the same kinds of things. And here's why. Because there's really only one truth. There aren't 5 of them. And so when we look at different aspects of truth, we're going to be looking at a lot of the same concepts just from a different angle. Here's what I'd like you to do, though. I'd like you to stand with me for a minute. Just take a moment and stretch. Probably strange time is the chiropractic, right? Just stretch. Okay, just take a little bit of a load off. You guys have been sitting, you've eaten a little while, a little while earlier. We've been bombarded with information. I'm going to make you a promise. I'm not going to bombard you with information. Okay, what I want to do, here was my purpose in coming here this weekend. I've been doing speaking for a very long time, and through the years, here's one thing that I've learned. Take one ultimate truth and drive it home. If I give you 20, you'll remember one. But if I want to be in charge of the one that you take home, I've got to keep driving it home. That's what we're going to do in a few minutes. Here's what I'd like you to do while still standing. Why don't you look around the room with me for a moment? Just indulge me for a minute. There are people you know, and there are people you don't know. Here's what I'm going to ask. I don't care whether you know them or don't know them. Is there something somebody said, not necessarily up here, this weekend, did this weekend, didn't do this weekend, that impressed you in terms of who they were? We are very, very reticent as human beings to bring out the best in one another. What did you notice? Now Jeff said yesterday, I want you to compliment someone on staff in this hotel. What I'd like you to do today is I would like you to speak the truth to someone. Now that's a compliment as well. As to something you observed, something they said, something they may not have even said to you, something they did, that you saw draw out where their heart is, what they're all about. I want you to take a moment, I don't care who it is. If you have to think for a few seconds, I want you to go over to that person and say, you know what? I noticed you talking to this person and that really blessed me. Or I want you to notice that something you shared this weekend, or we had a conversation, you don't know what that meant to me, or whatever it happens to be. Just find one person, and even if you have to wait in line for a few minutes, we're not going to continue on with this talk until somebody shares with you what they saw in reference to your heart. Here's the only rule that I would ask, not the speaker, only you guys, okay? And so take the next few minutes, find somebody in this room, only one person, and share with them, here's what I saw in you this weekend that revealed who you are to me. Take a few minutes to do it.
I really liked your presentation. You seem a lot more comfortable talking about people than last time.
Yeah.
You're just like, I want to see the rest of that presentation. I do. I haven't seen it yet. It's very Did she track herself?
She didn't go once for me. I never heard that. She said it. I never heard it. She kept telling me.
Maybe she should do that more often.
Not every time up to speak.
She probably doesn't. She probably still feels nervous. That particularly AWW orientation.
Yeah.
I wonder what it would be like if she gave
Yeah.
Anybody can give one. Just let me know when you're ready.
Kristen does a great job at transition. Yeah.
Take the kids, you can do it. It's a good idea. Get your leg in.
Okay, I'm gonna ask if we can return to our seats. Seeing people crying, hugging, it's good. Italian, work it up. For some of you, that was difficult. If it was difficult, then this last talk will benefit you tremendously. For some of you, that came very naturally. If it is, you could almost leave. I'm not asking you to leave, but you almost don't need to hear what I have to say. Flattery will get you nowhere. Flattery is telling somebody what you think they want to hear to gain an advantage. I'll tell you the truth. In all the years I've been encouraging people, I've rarely been advantaged by it, other than the blessing of what I was able to share with them. Flattery doesn't work because it's short-term and it's fake. Encouragement is what leaders do. And they do that because it stems out of who they are, and it stems out of who they are because they've worked on it, and they've worked on it hard. I'm going to open the floor for a moment and ask, for those of you who heard something encouraging, in other words, someone came up to you and said something, and I'm going to ask that you share with the room what they said. How did it make you feel? Now, please don't say, it made me feel good. Yeah, we know that, okay? Be a little bit more specific. Was it a surprise to you? Is it something that maybe you thought no one noticed? Anybody? What did it do for you? What did it do for you? Who would like to go second? I always say second, just say somebody's gone first already. What did it do for you? Anyway.
I think it creates a whole other connection with that person, because maybe you really didn't realize you ever connected with that person. Somebody comes up to you and says something, and all of a sudden you're like, cool, you know. And then you could say something back to them, and all of a sudden, man, you both connect with each other.
You get each other. You get each other. Anything else?
Kind of builds like really stronger bonds, like stronger relationships and stuff like that.
Excellent. Why?
Well, like if it's kind of like a surprise to some people, like you wouldn't think that they would kind of care that much, I guess, or like it's not even just about like you as like a professional, but like you as like a person and like a being like outside of work, I guess.
Excellent. Did you hear that? 19 years old, right? Awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Anybody else? Come on, we need a couple of you. Step up to the front. How did it make you feel? You felt something?
Creates a sense of certainty that not only that you're doing in your own office, it's everything that we're doing here together. It's a bigger certainty outside of the home relationship, how we stay.
Excellent. Okay. I'm going to ask you to take out that worksheet I asked you to look at this afternoon. While you're taking that out, I want to tell you a very brief story. Back in the summer of 1986, two ships, this is a true story, literally collided off of the coast of Russia in the Black Sea. Hundreds of passengers died. Look at this. This is a true story. Hundreds of passengers died as they were hurled into the icy waters below. Black Sea is a very, very scary place to be thrown into. It's very cold. News of the disaster was further darkened by an investigation into the cause of the accident. Now get this. It wasn't a technological problem like some kind of system malfunction or radar malfunction. It wasn't weather. There was no thick fog. Weather was ideal. The cause was human stubbornness. Each captain was totally aware of the other ship's presence nearby. Both could have steered clear of the other, but according to the news reports, neither captain wanted to give way to the other one. Each was too proud to yield first. By the time they came to their senses, it was too late. Is that unbelievable? And yet, very oftentimes, that's exactly what we do in our inner lives. We live in a nation that values its rights. You hear about that all the time. I have a right to this and a right to that. And while rights are very good, you know, somebody go over to mainland China and you might come back with a new appreciation for human rights. I totally can appreciate that. But this country has taken rights to a radical extreme. In fact, we've descended into being a nation that values its rights over right. And let me tell you something. If you want to do as a leader the right thing, I promise you, your rights will be violated. I promise you, your rights will be violated. The hardest part about leadership, if you want it to be effective, is that there are certain rights that you are holding on to right this minute that you feel the need to let go of, that you have the need to let go of. And there's a certain inconvenience to leadership, a certain comfort level that a person must be willing to dispense with if they're going to make an impact on the lives of other people as a leader. The hardest thing to do when we are all in a mad pursuit of success, and I'm not speaking about personal sacrifice to attain a goal that will benefit oneself. That's simply delayed gratification. And there's a lot of good to that. We heard about a lot of good life habits in this room this weekend, and that is wonderful. Don't misunderstand me. I was inspired by a lot of you to change some things in my own life that God has been impressing on me for a long time to change, and I thank you for that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the sacrifice that is part of being a leader. The sacrifices you make for success, please write this down, are the sacrifices you make for yourself. The sacrifices you make for success are the sacrifices you make for yourself. Say that one more time. The sacrifices you make for success are the sacrifices you make for yourself. I'm going to share something with you today that may rock your world. Your success, ultimately, I'm going to underline that word. Please, if I take the word ultimately out, this statement is false. Your successes ultimately benefit no one. That's the truth. My kids went to Prior Lake High School, a very, very wealthy community. My kids went to school with a lot of kids whose parents' financial success did not benefit them ultimately. Benefited them temporarily. You go into the parking lot and you see Mercedes-Benzes and BMWs and all kinds of cars I wish I had, driven by 17, 18-year-old kids. Hasn't benefited them, however. Because what a lot of these kids lack, according to them, is their parents. Well, they live in a nice house, they drive a nice car, nothing wrong with that. But they don't have mom and dad because mom and dad are so busy making sacrifices for their own success that haven't benefited anybody. You with me so far? Please remember this. The sacrifices a leader makes doesn't benefit the leader. It doesn't. It benefits others, and the benefit of others is the benefit to the leader. Did you get that? And I have to say that one more time. The sacrifices a leader makes are the benefits to others. You say, then what does the leader get? Nothing directly. Nothing directly. One of my favorite scriptures, and it's hard for me to say this without getting emotional, is in the scripture it says that although he was rich, speaking of Christ, yet for our sakes he became poor, so that through his poverty we might become rich. That's the ultimate leader. You know what my hero is? My hero is Jesus Christ. Let me tell you why. Nobody you can throw up on a PowerPoint or a presentation, nobody from the world of theology, which is my world, chiropractic, which is your world, has ever loved you that much, to give up that much for your benefit. But here's the strange part. The strange part is that the author of Hebrews, who also just wrote what I said this: for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. Whether you believe that the crucifixion is a historical event or not, crucifixion was a historical event. The Assyrians invented it, and We Italians perfected it, okay? We've also invented guilt and a bunch of other things. But what basically you died of was the inability to breathe. You were impaled to a piece of wood, hanging by the fullness of your body weight until your chest cavity basically caved in under its weight. Why would somebody do this? He did it for you, so that you might benefit. And your benefit became his gain. That's ultimate leadership. Are there human beings who have done that? Absolutely. Absolutely. Dwight Eisenhower, who saw his share of death as the supreme commander of the Allied forces during World War II, said this: "A people that values its privileges in front of or before its principles lose both." That's the truth. C.S. Lewis put it very similarly. He said, if you want heaven and earth together, you'll lose both. You can't have both. There's going to be certain things that you want to impact the lives of others in that are going to require personal sacrifices from you. Now, I am not talking about skills or competencies. I don't have the skills and competencies to teach a group like this. All of you are so fit, it makes me sick. It really does. I'm still a fat Italian guy, okay, who needs to get in shape. And you're inspiring me. I can't teach you that. Here's what I can share with you. To be a leader, not a chiropractor, a leader in what you do, because you're not all chiropractors. You all work in this field in some way, shape, or form, and you are all parts of an organism that is going to touch the lives of people we call patients, but at the end of the day, they're people. They're people with feelings, they're people with lives, they're people with pasts, they're people with ambitions. They're people like the lady that you saw in that video today, who was talking about why she's there and what brought her there and her story. Leaders care about folks like that. Successful people don't necessarily. They're going to say, next, let's build the next patient. This is how you learn. Listen, you learn to be a chiropractor in chiropractic school. You learn to be a practitioner in the clinic, but you learn to be a leader in life. And here's the thing, everyone who comes into your clinic has a life. They don't necessarily have the other things that build for success. And that's why everyone loves to be around leaders, because they get to enjoy the benefit of the way those people inspire them by having the experience that the sacrifices they make have in order to inspire us. Now, not everyone wants to be a leader. You may be sitting here this weekend thinking, I don't want to be a leader, I'll just be a chiropractor. You know what? That's where you are right now. I appreciate your honesty. Maybe that's what you ought to remain for a little while. Until life, and I believe the Lord, begins to impress on you the importance of being a leader. Being a leader is scary. So they avoid it completely, content to have their private life free of truly inspiring anyone, or they redefine leadership in a way that nobody really defines it anymore, according to the principles of their competency. The hardest thing about being a leader is to live up what you're telling others to do. I've never met a person who wanted others to be insensitive, or to be unforgiving, or to be impatient, or to be stubborn, or to be self-willed with them. I've never had somebody say, wow, you know what? You were really, really offensive to me. I want you to tell you how much I appreciate that. No one's going to tell them that. But I'll tell you the truth. You may not be the best chiropractor in the world. You show the kind of love and sacrifice that leaders have, and they're going to remember you. They're going to remember you. I got to tell you, and I don't want to put them on the spot, but I have to say this. Again, I'm ashamed to, I've never been to a chiropractor. I will be next month. Be going to Northern Life Chiropractic. I'm excited about it. But I got to say honestly that in meeting Jeff Danielson, and I said this to my wife just yesterday, and I don't, do I really know what kind of chiropractor he is? I know his reputation, and I believe his reputation. Don't get me wrong. There are people here in the realm of chiropractic today who have impressed the heck out of me this weekend that have been under his tutelage. Do you know why I feel drawn to Jeff Danielson? Because he's a precious man. I know that's not a word guys use a lot. He's a precious man. He has a heart, and he has a care and a compassion for people that really makes me not care that much that he's a chiropractor anymore. That's kind of a side benefit. That's what makes him a leader. I have to believe that a lot of you who know him feel the same way. I spoke to Justin over lunch today. Precious heart. Again, very confident, started his own. That doesn't impress me. What impresses me is what I heard come out of that man's heart. Having spoken to John yesterday, and just his enthusiasm encourages me. It's who they are. And a lot of your presentations today, I heard your hearts come out. Yeah, a lot of great information. A lot of great information. But I'll tell you the truth, what inspired me the most is what came out of you. Folks, you have to fight for that. You have to fight for that because everything in our success-oriented culture is going to work against that. Let's face it, I believe in the chiropractic profession. I truly do. My wife, we're very, you don't have to convince us that this is a valid path to wellness that we want to follow. But like any profession, you got to bill, and you got to get the numbers in, and you got to get the growth, and you got to do all this. And that is valid because, let's face it, the more people you touch, the more of an impact you make, and you have to pay your bills, and you have to have the equipment and all the rest to be able to do it, which costs money. And you want to bless people and have them have a great career. But the problem is this, that reality is always going to be pulling against the reality of being the kind of man or being the kind of woman that is going to make the sacrifices to make you a great leader. And that's where the balance comes in. And that's where the things that I asked you about this morning, what are the things about you that you really need to see change? Because I'll tell you this, I don't know what they are, I don't want to know what they are, and I don't want anybody else to know what they are. Here's the funny thing though, anyone who's hung out with you long enough already knows what they are. They do, you can't hide them. And you bring that into everything that you do. But whatever they are, I can guarantee you they boil down to one thing, a right that you're not willing to let go. It's really what I look at every fault in my life, and there are plenty of them, and they all boil down to a lie. The lie is this, Larry, you should do this bad thing because you deserve it, or you have the right to it, or you should have it, or it will make you happy, or whatever. We were talking today, right, Justin, about people who say, that was me for a long time, you know, this is bad for you, I don't want to hear it's bad for you. Why don't you want to hear it's bad for you? You're in denial. Because I have the right to do this. I have the right to eat this, I have the right to do this, or not do this, or whatever else. And there are rights that we have to let go of as leaders. And saying, you know what? In order for me to make an impact, there's got to be a distance between what I feel I should have and what God says I should have. I want you to do an experiment with me for a moment. I want you to put your right hand on, a lot of you have pads in front of you. Put it right down on your pad. And I want you to lift it approximately a half an inch off that pad. Just hit it. Now, with that lifted up, hit the pad as hard as you can. Okay, now, I want you to lift it up this high off the pad. Hit it as hard as you can. That was a lot louder, wasn't it? Why? The difference was distance. The distance. That baby's loving me right now. The distance is this, and please jot this down. When you create greater distance between your rights and what is right, you make the impact. When you create a greater distance between your rights and what is right, you make the impact. Every failure I've experienced in life and every failure I am currently experiencing in life has been the failure to do that. Alfred Adler, who was a very, very, yes? Sure. The distance that you create between your rights, what you feel you need to hold on to, and what is right affects the impact you make in life. Alfred Adler, who was a very famous psychologist, said this: "It is easier to fight for one's principles than to live up to them." That's very true. Living up to your principles is this: your principles are what you want to be. That's the kind of person you want to be. The way we often fight for those principles is our desire to see that in other people. They should be nicer. They should be friendlier. They should be more caring. And that's true. It's difficult to live in a world where those principles aren't lived out but where do we begin? You heard it said a few times over this weekend, you cannot control what other people do. You can only control what you do. But I'll tell you the truth, it's a very interesting thing. That listening to a lot of you this weekend, and please forgive me, I'm still getting to know names, but man, you've really inspired me. I think honestly, I don't know, I hope that my presence here has blessed you in some way. I know yours has to me. It really has. And there are things that a lot of you said that it's kind of like the Lord was just going back. All right, Larry, but in a good way, in a loving way, in a gentle way, in a caring way. That's what leadership does. Because you're striving for the best in the other person. In order for us to get there, however, we have to get to a crossroads experience. Now that experience may be an aha moment in a seminar like this. That may be a crisis in your personal life. That may be an epiphany of some way. That may be a combination of both. But here's what it really comes down to. I want you to look again at those handouts I gave you. And take a look on the first page, the things that you liked or were blessed by the people who were a blessing to you. Those characteristics that draw you to other people. That's what you need to do. Are you? I don't know. Now, I'm tempted to say, only you can answer that question. Please write this down. You can't answer that question. You can't answer that question if you are those things. If we all like to believe we're those things. Who can answer that question? The people around you. The people closest to you. The people who can be honest with you. My wife is very often, and I so much appreciate it, brutally honest with me. Okay? That wasn't good, that was bad, that stunk, that's this, you're obnoxious, you're this and that. 99% of the time, what really sucks is she's right. And so she'll tell me those things but I know she loves me and I know she accepts me. But the reality is, I'd like to believe I'm more patient than I really am. I'd love to believe I'm nicer than I really am. I'd like to believe I'm more social and interesting than I really am. And none of us are. None of us are. And you can say, okay, so look, now here's the thing. So then we say, because this is America, the land of enterprise, I want to learn how to be that. You can't learn how to be that. You can't. It's already in you. Let me read a book on being more interesting. The book is not going to make you more interesting. Let me go to a seminar on being nicer. Seminars don't make you nicer. What makes you nicer and all of those things is releasing the things that you wrote on the next part of your page. Take a look at those for a minute. The things that people have said to you this far, things that people have observed and said that kind of needs to change. Let me give you a very appropriate illustration of what I'm talking about. My favorite Christmas story, other than of course the real Christmas story, is A Christmas Carol. I love that. I got to watch it like 20 times every season. Okay. What I love about it is this guy was such a creep, wasn't he? Remember the Ebenezer Scrooge, right? And he was such a creep. And three ghosts come in one evening and totally change him around. Let me ask you a question. Was it in the man to be what he was after those three ghostly visitations? Absolutely. What changed? Please write this down. What changed? It's what he let go. It's what he let go. He went from a miserly, miserable, uncaring person to having an open heart that literally drew others in. Is that possible? Yes. Yes. And if you remember the story, what did he let go of? He let go of the fact that as a child, he himself had been hurt. And because others hurt him, what was he going to do? He wasn't going to open himself up to be hurt again. I'll be honest with you, the events that I shared with you yesterday in the last 5 years of my life, I've been hurt a lot as well. You can probably imagine. It was all deserved, but it doesn't hurt any less. And one of the things that I have had to let go was, people have hurt me, so I'm going to kind of turtle into my little shell. And until I let that go, I'll never touch another person. When we look at these two things, the first that I'd like you to think about today is, aside from professional goals, what do you stand for? I want you to take a moment and think about that. You don't have to write it down, just want you to think about it. I have spoken with folks who work with students on college campuses. And they express a real concern over what they're seeing today. I don't know if this is true in the chiropractic colleges, but people who work with Campus Crusade and other groups who work with college students, and they'll always say the same thing to me. They say, Larry, you know, years ago, back in the 60s, and even the 70s, you'd ask a college student on campus, so tell me, where are you going? And they'd say things like, I want to work in the Peace Corps, I want to make a difference in the medical community, or I want to do that, I want to start my own business, I want to help the poor. They said most of the time you'll ask a kid on campus today, where are you going? And they'll say, lunch. It's a whole different idea. Why? Because the notion of outward living is completely gone in the minds of many people. We have been damaged by the success syndrome. Remember what Johann Goethe said, and this is a great, actually I'm going to go ahead for a second and just, okay, I'm not going to go there. I didn't put him in. Please just jot this down. He wrote this, it's not important who said it. A talent is formed in stillness. A talent is formed in stillness. A character in the world's torrents. A talent is formed in stillness. Where is it formed? It's formed in the womb. You have natural talents. But a character is formed in the world's torrents. You know what a torrent is? It's a flood. It's a difficult time. In order to acquire what it takes to have an impact on the lives of others amidst your professional pursuits and your personal goals, you need to have a compass. We talked about that. I cannot stress enough that without that compass in saying not what I do, but who I am, and if I came here this weekend to tell you one thing, you'll get all the how do I do it within your profession, is who are you? Who are you? Because I got to share something with you this afternoon that I really want you to listen. In fact, please do me a favor, drop your pens for a minute and just don't lose eye contact with me for a moment, because this is one of the most important things I can say to you this weekend. Nobody cares. This is I'm pushing 50. I've been around a while, okay? I've worked with thousands and thousands of people and have been in thousands and thousands of professional situations, and I can tell you that I'm 150% sure about what I'm about to say. Nobody cares about how successful you are. They don't. Nobody cares about how much money you have in the bank. They don't. And when I say nobody, I'm talking about your mate, I'm talking about your kids as well. Nobody cares what neighborhood you live in. Nobody cares what car you drive, except for you. That's it. Now, would people like your car? Oh, absolutely. Will people envy your home? No question about it. Will people compliment you about the clothes you wear and the money you have? Unquestionably. It happens all the time. That's not what I said. What I said is, nobody cares. In fact, most of the things we possess are things that others use as a springboard to say, I want that myself, or I'm envious of you because you have that. Nobody cares about that. You say, well, my wife cares because if I have a big house, she can live in it. Let me tell you something. The people with the nicest, biggest homes, the beautiful people in America, statistically, have the highest rate of divorce and the worst marriages. It's not true. Your kids would rather live in a shack with a mother and a father who invests in them than live in a large home where parents are never home. They really don't care either. Don't misunderstand. Will people like the nice things you have? Duh. Of course they'll like the nice things you have. That's not what I asked. But they don't care. Let me tell you what they care about. They care about who you are and what you project. Listen carefully. A leader, if you really want to boil it down, because we've done a lot of theory this weekend, let me put it in the simplest, clearest possible terms. Do you know what people really care about when they meet you? It's going to sound really simple, but I want you to think about this. They care about how they make you feel. That's it. Let me explain what I mean by that. How many of you have ever experienced the following phenomenon? You walk into a store, you walk into a chiropractic office, you meet a person for the first time, and you literally have a 2-minute interchange with that person. 2 minutes. How much can you cover in 2 minutes? Never met the person before. And then you walk away, and that person walks away. And the person you're with, you turn to and say, wow, she's a really nice girl. How in the world did you know that? How do you know she's a nice girl? You know nothing about her. How many times have you done that? You just see a show of hands. Now let me just ask you a question. What made you say that? I want you to really think about the last time that happened to you. What made you say that? If you met them and they weren't interested, if you met them and they were offensive, if you met them and they were distracted, if you met them and they were grumpy, if you met them and they ended up talking to somebody else, would you have said that? No. What did they do? They made you feel like you mattered. That's what people care about. And you can say, okay, so if I can just learn to act like I care about them. No, you're missing my point. You can't act, people will see through it. So it's got to be a heart that says, I genuinely care about you. I genuinely care about you. My leadership style, my speaking style, I'm not an entertainer. I don't come to entertain. I come to inform. A lot of people will say, you know, Larry's very intense. Yeah, I'm intense. That's true. I'm going to be true to who I am. I'm intense. But I love intensely, and I serve intensely, and I live intensely, and I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. The bottom line is this. I might not be gushy and warm and cute and whatever else, but if I'm going to love you, I'm going to love you. I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to care about you. I may do it the way I do it. Don't ask anybody to change the way you do it. It's not a personality transplant. It's not looking like, you know, in a lot of the public speaking profession, they teach you to look animated and to look interesting and to look this. That's baloney. People will see through that. The bottom line is this. What people are looking for is a heart, and hearts must be broken before they are remade. And broken hearts are the ones that care, and the ones that care are the ones that lead. You with me this afternoon? What's really critical is this, that the greatest impact is going to be made, regardless of the profession, of the person who says no to those personal rights that they're going to hold on to for the better good of the whole. I'm going to share with you one story that I'm sure many of you have already heard, but as I share it again, maybe some of you have never heard this. And think real clearly, because this is such a great illustration of what I'm talking about. It was written by a fellow named Ken Blanchard many years ago, and as we're getting into the Christmas season, it's a perfect opportunity to end off with this. He writes, he was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another obscure village, where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never went to college. He never visited a big city. He never traveled more than 200 miles from the place where he was born. He did none of the things usually associated with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. That's leadership. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves. While dying, his executors gambled for his clothing, the only property he had on earth. And when he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 19 centuries have come and gone, and today, Jesus is the central figure of the human race and the leader of mankind's progress. All the armies that have ever marched, all the navies that have ever sailed, all the parliaments that have ever sat, all the kings that have ever reigned, have not affected the life of mankind on earth as powerfully as this one solitary leader. That's leadership. How did he do it? How did he do it? He sacrificed. He sacrificed what? His rights. He sacrificed the rights that get in our way of making the impact that no one's made greater. Here's some good advice. Be like him. Be like him. The second question I asked you has to do with your supporting cast. Who's going to hold you accountable to do this? How are you going to get there? One of the greatest goofs in the ministry is the belief that I had to go it alone. I didn't allow others that I trusted to hold me accountable enough. And the end was disaster. Who do you have? As I mentioned earlier, if it's one person, that's great. Hopefully the one you live with. In identifying the areas of life that you know that you have the biggest danger points, and I asked you to write that down, Begin to strategize about the ways that people who really love you will keep you on track and help you to reach the goals that you have set about, listen, about who you want to be, not who you want to do. You'll always have enough coaching as to what you want to do. But as we heard a little earlier today, we're not human doers, we're human beings. So the transition from successful leader to, from a person to a successful leader could take years, that's okay. It takes a lifetime to master. It's a commitment to being rather than doing, but with functioning or doing in a supportive role. All you need to do to be an effective doctor, office staff, or support staff is to be competent. And as a layperson in the medical field, I can't tell you how many times I've visited a doctor's office to experience one of two scenarios. I mentioned this before. Either I thought the doctor was wonderful and his staff sucked, or the staff was wonderful and the doctor sucked, and it wasn't the competency that really made me make that determination. It was the person. It was the person. It's amazing how many professionals can lose themselves in all of the minutia of what they think is going to make them good at their profession, but lose the very characteristics that make them effective. I just want to close on one more funny story. We can so get lost with the trees that we lose the whole forest. The following, and I want to read this to you, is an actual transcript from an actual court case. Here's an example of an attorney trying to be so successful that he not only lost the bigger picture, but he literally lost his mind. Listen to this actual court transcript. The lawyer says, "Doctor, how many autopsies have you performed on dead people?" The witness says, "All of my autopsies were performed on dead people." And the lawyer says, "Do you recall the time that you examined the body?" "Yes, the autopsy started about 8:30 p.m. and Mr. Johnson was dead at the time." "No, he was sitting on the table wondering why I was doing an autopsy." Next day, okay, same doctor, same lawyer. Lawyer says, "Before you performed the autopsy, did you check for a pulse?" "No." "Did you check for blood pressure?" "No." "Did you check for breathing?" "No." "So that it's possible that the patient was alive when you began the autopsy?" "No." "How can you be so sure, doctor?" "Because his brain was sitting on a desk in a jar." Listen, this is how driven we can get. "But could the patient have been alive nonetheless?" It's a great answer. He said, "It's possible, and he could have been alive and practicing law somewhere." Folks, here's the bottom line. We can get so into competency that we lose our character. Back to our surveys, and then we'll close. If you're having a hard time identifying the aspects of your inner life that you're needing the greatest accountability in work, who do you ask? It's a little test now. Who do you ask? Who do you ask?
Spouse.
The people closest to you. And ask them to be real honest. It's a little ugly, but you know what? It'll help you in the long run. And if you're having a hard time identifying the source of a good compass, ask yourself this question. Who knows you best? Who knows you best? I think of the story of Charlie Steinmetz. Charlie was a dwarf. But what he lacked in physical stature, he made up for in an unparalleled knowledge of mechanical engineering. Charlie worked for Henry Ford back in the 20s when Ford Motor Company was growing and Henry was pumping out cars on his vast assembly line. And Henry was in charge of making sure that those assembly lines kept running and the cars kept being built. And one day, for some unknown reason, those vast assembly lines grinded to a halt. So he got on the phone and called Charlie Steinmetz and he said, "Charlie, get over here." Charlie ran over there and he pushed a few buttons. He pulled a few levers, and wouldn't you know it, a few minutes later, those big generators were running. That assembly line was pumping out cars again. A month later, Charlie sent Henry a bill for his services, $10,000. You remember, this was back in the 20s. But even though Ford was a wealthy man, he kind of thought, wow, it's kind of a high price for pushing a few buttons and pulling a few levers. So he decided to sit down and write Charlie a letter. That's what he wrote. "Dear Charlie, don't you think $10,000 is a bit steep, pushing a few buttons and pulling a few levers? Sincerely, Henry." About a week later, he got a reply in the mail from Charlie, and this is what he wrote. Dear Henry, for pushing a few buttons and pulling a few levers, $10. For knowing which buttons to push and which levers to pull, $9,999. Sincerely, Charlie. Who knows your buttons best? The one who made them. Who knows your levers the best? The one who made them. Who's your North Star? The person you've been hearing about all weekend. When we go to him, the reason why a God-centered and Christ-centered practice is so critical is because you're asking for help from the person who designed you. It gets even better. You're asking help from the person who also designed all your patients. He's the one who is so good at working on the inside as well. Change, and therefore leadership, is deep. It's deep because it comes from the school of leadership that begins in the classroom of the heart. It requires the shaping of your inner life to change from being self-oriented to others-oriented. Leadership is wide because it allows others in. Not only those who will check you and keep you on the straight and narrow, but as a result, those who you allow in to truly touch with the heart that God is shaping within you. Leadership is high because it is guided by a compass that is greater than the sum of your professional parts. Something bigger than ourselves, or dare I say, someone bigger. We close with this last observation this morning, this afternoon. Leadership comes from the heart of a man. It's not from his head. If it were, it would be a program. It's not from his hands, otherwise it would be a procedure. But it's from his heart, the deepest part of who he is, and that's why it's priceless. I pray that you take this weekend and begin the process of saying, you know what, wherever I am on the leadership trajectory, I'm going to be accountable. I'm going to look to my North Star, and I'm going to make sure that the inner part of who I am is in the best position to do the best good for the best and the greatest amount of people, because that becomes the reward in itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Whoa, that was bringing it home.